Hello and welcome to this week's video. My name is Anuska Taylor. Thank you so much for joining me. And if you haven't yet subscribed to my channel, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. And also, if you enjoy my videos, don't forget to give me a like, a comment, a share, because it really does help. And I want to thank you all for supporting my channel. And before I forget, to wish you a very happy new year. So today's topic is something I haven't really talked about before, which is the subject of hearing and why that matters as a speaker. Because I think it's one of those topics that often gets underestimated in its role as a speaker in voice production, not only how you hear your voice, as in what you hear in your head and how the whole system works, but also how your listener hears your voice. So I'm going to be talking about this, giving you a little bit of science behind it, and also sharing why I think it is so important for you as a speaker. So I'm not going to go into great amounts of science depth because I'm not an expert in audiology and hearing, etc. But I think having the basic understanding is really going to help you to really perhaps motivate you to do the work on your voice and to access the full potential in your voice, which is available to you all. So I'm going to be sharing a diagram in a second because I think it's probably the easiest way, because there's a lot of little weird names, and I think it's just easier if you can see it in a diagram than me trying to explain it. But first of all, we're going to talk about how we hear. And this is all of us. And unless, of course, you are deaf or you've got any sort of serious hearing issues, this is how most of us hear and interpret what we hear around us. So let me share the diagram first of all. So this diagram is just going to hopefully give you a little bit of understanding about the anatomy, what's sort of going on within your ear. And you can see that there are broadly three main sections. So the outer ear, the bit that you can see, the middle ear, and the inner ear. The inner ear is the bit that we're going to be focusing more on, because that's really where all the magic happens. Well, I mean, it's an incredible feat of nature's engineering anyway, but I really want to focus more on the inner ear. But let's start first of all with a very basic understanding of how we actually hear sound. So you're hearing my voice now. So let's use this as an example. You're hearing my voice through YouTube, and those sound waves are entering your outer ear and traveling through the ear canal to your eardrum. So they're probably terms you've heard: ear canal, eardrum. The eardrum is also known as the tympanic membrane, which you can see on that diagram. Now, the eardrum vibrates from these incoming sound waves you're getting from my voice, and that sends vibrations to three tiny bones within your middle ear, which are called the malleus, the incus, and the stapes. Now, for some reason, only two of them are marked on that diagram, but there are, in fact, three tiny little bones. And these bones amplify those sound waves and send them to the cochlea. And the cochlea, you can see marked on that diagram, is a sort of snail-shaped structure filled with fluid. This is going to be the focus that I want to go into in a second, because this is where the secret sauce is, I guess, for your voice and why it's so important to develop your voice. But anyway, let's just keep going with how we hear. So these sound waves are sent to the cochlea. The cochlea is filled with fluid. So once these vibrations cause the fluid in the cochlea to ripple, a traveling wave forms along the basilar membrane. Now, the basilar membrane is not actually in this diagram because it's actually within the cochlea. So I'm now going to move to another diagram because you kind of need to see both of these. So this next diagram I'm just going to bring up. So this is within the cochlea. So this is the cochlea uncoiled, and that long line that you can see is called the basilar membrane, with all of those different frequencies with arrows coming off it. Now, depending on the frequency of the sound that you're hearing is going to determine which section of that basilar membrane is going to vibrate. And as the fluid moves, around 25,000 nerve endings are set in motion. And these nerve endings transform those vibrations into electrical impulses. And that is what is sent to the brain to be interpreted. And that is what you hear. So that is, in a nutshell, how you hear sound. Again, as I said, this is very simplified. So what I want you to really understand as a speaker and why you should be motivated to develop your voice is what's going on within the cochlea. So I've done many videos before on resonance, and resonance being the voice that you're really aiming for, the voice that is absolutely available to you. This is the richest, the fullest, the most engaging, the most expressive, the most energized voice, vibrant voice that you can create. It's also the voice that projects easily, that doesn't tire easily. It's the voice that you are really aiming for when you do any voice work, because it's really the truest, fullest version of your voice. Now, the reason we are aiming for this is what is going on within the cochlea, because this is how your listener is receiving your sound. And when you understand this, then hopefully you are more motivated to do the work, to actually really explore your voice, explore the potential in your voice. It's not just me saying you need to access your resonant voice, because that sounds like a nice marketing tool. There really is a lot of science to back up. Your resonant voice is engaging, compelling, exciting, and makes the greatest impact to your audience. So why is that? So coming back to this diagram, you can see, as we said, the cochlea has been uncoiled, so we can see all the different frequencies along the length of it. And you can see that it can interpret sound from 25 hertz. I think up on that diagram, it's going up to 1600 hertz. But you can see there's a vast spectrum of sound that it can interpret. Now, depending on the frequency of the sound that you're hearing will depend on what section or sections of the basilar membrane vibrate. And why does this matter? Well, because the more resonant your voice, the more harmonics are in your voice. And what that means is there's more layers of sound, there's more depth, there's literally more depth, there's more richness, there's more harmonics, meaning your listener is going to have more of their basilar membrane vibrating. So if your voice is very monotone, it's going to be very, very limited, which is why a monotone voice just doesn't sound interesting at all. And most of us switch off when a voice just stays at the same frequency. But the more energy, vibrancy, impact we can make with our voice, the more of that basilar membrane is going to light up. And importantly for your listener, the more nerve impulses are going to be sent to their brain, which excites the brain. The brain loves the voice. The brain loves to hear all of this richness and this resonance in a voice. Now, whether you're aware of it or not, you will be more drawn to resonant voices, but you may not have ever had those words to put to it before. But this is why, as I said, this is not me telling you this. This is science backing it up, that a resonant voice is more engaging. It's more exciting to your listener's ear, meaning they're going to want to listen to you. So that's the first thing, which is obviously quite significant. So I'm just going to remove this now so I can come back to you seeing me. So that's the first thing. And again, if you're interested to understand more about the resonant voice, I've done many videos on it. I will link to some in this video. So really do start to understand, but it does take some training. Most people do not just magically wake up with a resonant voice for lots of the reasons I've talked about before, because most of us are conditioned to shut our voices down. So we're not going to naturally just access that. It's something that you have to really train yourself and bring a lot of awareness to access. But it's absolutely available to you if you want to access it. So the other part of this as well, in terms of how we hear, is also just this idea of active listening, which I'm sure you've heard of this term before, but it is so important. Being a great speaker is not just about speaking. It's about being able to really listen, because then you can have far more engaging and meaningful conversations with other people, far more fulfilling, authentic conversations. And for many of us, I think, particularly in our modern world, we're not really ever listening to anyone. We're normally preparing what we're going to say while someone is still talking. I imagine, and I'm just guessing here, probably even while you're watching this video, you're probably doing something else, which is fine, no judgment, but just to start to become aware, how easy do I find it to actively listen? Because it will make you a better speaker. Because when people feel really heard, they are more likely to want to connect with you, want to engage with you. So just start to notice that in yourself. Am I always preparing to speak while someone is still talking? Do I interrupt people? Do I talk over them at the end of their sentences? Or do I give people space to really be heard? Because you're going to be a far more compelling, engaging, and authentic speaker and create real meaningful connections with people. So that's the first aspect. How we hear, really important from a resonance perspective. Understanding that is essential. Now, the next part of this is equally as important, which is how you make sound. Now, you might think, oh, well, my ears don't really have much to do with this. I just open my mouth and my vocal folds vibrate and I breathe and bang, my voice comes out. And actually, in all honesty, when I do my voice videos, normally I don't mention hearing in this process, but actually hearing is essential, which is why you'll find that if someone is deaf or has acquired deafness, their speech normally suffers in some way because we need to be able to hear ourselves to speak. So let's talk about this for a minute, because this is what we call the auditory feedback loop. And there's 3 sections to this. So it's say it, listen to it, process, modify it. That's kind of what's happening. Now, again, with all of this is happening at lightning speed, but simply put, it's these 3 sections. Say it, listen to it, modify, process it. Modify, process is one section. So first of all, you say it. So you have a thought. You think, I want, and again, this is happening really fast, but you're thinking, I want to say this to this person. You have a thought, and your brain transforms those thoughts into physical actions by sending signals through the central nervous system to the muscles of respiration, phonation, and articulation, so you can speak. And then while you're speaking, whether you're aware of this or not, you are listening to yourself speaking. You can't not listen to yourself speak. So you are listening to yourself. And in that moment, again, this is all happening at lightning speed, your ears and your brain are monitoring the sound that's coming out of your mouth. And then, depending on what sound has come out of your mouth, you may process / modify that. You might tweak it for the next time you say something. And so you'll rectify it for the next sound that you make, the next sentence that you say. Now, most of us do this without even thinking. You know, as I said, unless we have problems with our hearing, most of us will do this very naturally. And you can't not do this. This is happening all the time. Particularly important. I mean, if you've ever sung, whether you're a professional or not, if you've ever sung, but you can't really hear yourself, you'll know how difficult it is to pitch, to really hear your voice. It's actually quite challenging, particularly when you're learning, to really have any sense of your voice when you can't hear your voice, which is why for a singer, we always want to be able to hear ourselves. Otherwise, we are probably going to overcompensate, push our voice. You know, we really don't know what is coming out of our mouth. So this ability to hear is absolutely essential. But also, I would argue, as a speaker as well, when you think about nature gave us this incredible instrument, but nature didn't give us this instrument to keep to ourselves. You know, we can talk to ourselves in our head. We don't need to express it outwardly. So we've been given this instrument to share. So actually being able to kind of modify this sound so that we can actually bring our best voice forward is an essential component to that. So when we are talking to people, we can modify, we can rectify sounds, or, oh my God, I shouldn't have said that. Let me say something else. Or I didn't really want it to come out in that tone, so let me rectify that. So there's this constant auditory feedback loop happening every time we speak and sing. I just want to point out as well that the auditory feedback kind of process is, relatively speaking, quite slow. So we can't, when we speak, make changes in real time. There is a slight delay. So you say something, you're not going to be able to modify in that second or that millisecond that you're saying it, but you can then modify it for the next time you say something, or the next sentence, or the next thought, or the next sound that you're making. It's a bit easier as a singer because often we are holding notes. So if you start with a note and you're like, oh no, that's a bit off pitch, you can modify it because we're normally holding them longer. One of the big differences between singing and speaking is we're holding notes, whereas with speaking, we're normally moving through sounds very, very quickly. So the process of actually this auditory feedback loop, interestingly, is slower than the process of speech. So we can't do it in real time, but it absolutely impacts what's going to come out of our mouth the next time we speak. So why does this auditory feedback loop and understanding this matter as a speaker? Well, we've got another complexity to this. So you're saying something, you're listening to yourself, and then you can correct it for the next thing you say. But it's not quite so simple as that, because what you hear in your head is not what anyone else hears. So you are hearing something that is not actually really an accurate representation of your voice. This is why I say to people all the time, you must record yourself, because what you are hearing is only you are hearing it that way, because you are hearing your voice through bone and air conduction. Everyone else is hearing it through air conduction, which is why your voice often sounds different to you when you hear it on a recording. And you're like, whoa, that's not me, but it is you. So again, coming back to my point that the voice is really to be shared, because if it's just for you, you can just talk to yourself in your head. So coming from that place of my voice is here to really serve and to share, to connect, to communicate, to build relationships, etc. I want to bring the best version of my voice forward. Meaning, I really want to understand what other people are hearing when they hear me speak. So record yourself. This is why you have to record yourself, because otherwise you are really misperceiving your voice. Now, what you'll hear in your head typically is going to be a lower, sort of richer sound than what other people are hearing. So really, really important. And then you can kind of tweak it. And what you want to get to a point is that what you are hearing in your head, you can close the gap because you're so used to hearing a recording. You can close the gap between what you hear in the recording and what you hear in your head. And that's kind of where I've got to now. I don't hear so much of a difference. But initially, like many years ago, when I started doing this, there was a big difference to me because I wasn't used to the sound of my voice. But the more you listen to it, the more they sort of start to morph into one sound. So this is why you really want to regularly record yourself and listen back. This is also why working with a coach is so important and also helpful, because what you hear is not what anyone else hears. And again, coming back to my point that your voice is really here to connect with other people. It's not really about you. It's about you sharing. So it's really, about you bringing the best version of your voice forward. So that's the first thing. And I said this before, I'll say it again, please record yourself and listen back. You may be pleasantly surprised, or you might be thinking, I need to do something here because I think there's a better version of my voice trying to emerge. Now, the other aspect of this as well, in terms of this auditory feedback loop, is my second sort of idea for you to think about is visualization is a powerful tool for rehearsing a presentation, rehearsing a speech, a keynote, whatever it is that you're doing. It's so, so incredibly powerful. And the reason being is because in this auditory feedback loop process we've talked about, the brain not only responds to what it hears you say, like outwardly, but it also responds to what you imagine that you say. Meaning, you can literally practice your presentation in your head, and it will be as if you are practicing it for real. And singers do this a lot, so you don't even have to open your mouth. You could sit there in a sort of meditative state, visualize yourself on your stage or in your meeting, use your voice, imagine that you're speaking, and the brain will respond as if you are, as in it will respond to your imagination. So again, really powerful tool. A lot of people don't really utilize this enough as well. I know it's used massively in the sporting world to visualize people getting that goal or hitting tennis ball over the net or whatever sport it is, but we don't use it enough in our day-to-day life. But just know this again is the science to back up. This is why visualization is so powerful, because your brain literally doesn't know the difference. It will respond to your imagination as if it's happening in real life right now. And then finally, kind of already alluded to this already, but the more you start to close the gap between what you hear in a recording and get really comfortable with what you hear in a recording and listen to yourself regularly, because your voice changes. You know, as you age, when you're sick, when you're stressed, when you're tired, there's shifts in the voice anyway, naturally for us all. Hormones, as a woman going through your period, going through menopause, you're going to hear changes in your voice. It's all really, really natural and all really, really normal. So listen to your voice regularly, record it, listen back. But as I said to you, the more you can start to close the gap between what you hear in a recording and what you hear in your head, the easier this kind of auditory feedback loop is going to work for you, because then you are going to feel more empowered to create change when you hear it in your head, whether it's tone, whether it's volume, whether it's pace, whether it's pronunciation. You will really trust yourself that what you're hearing is what you're hearing. So really start to utilize these gifts that we get through nature's incredible gift to us around hearing and how we hear and how we create sound, and also how we perceive sound in other people. So I hope this has been really helpful. I'd love to know your comments, and try some of these things out. You know, start recording yourself, start visualizing, and go away and listen to your voice. Like, do a recording, you know, listen to how resonant is my voice? Is it engaging? Is it compelling? Is there richness? Is there depth? Is there a fullness in my voice? Or is it fairly kind of flat and monotone and boring? Because I'm going to leave you with this point, remember your voice is to be shared. Your voice is here to communicate, to engage, and to connect. It's not really about you. It's you being able to share your gifts and your talents through your voice. So you want to bring your best voice to the table, and it honestly is available to you all. Of course, unless you've had any sort of serious pathology on your voice or you experience issues with hearing, for most people, there is absolutely no reason why you cannot access more resonance, more harmonics in your voice and become a far more compelling and engaging speaker. So I'm going to leave you with that. Please do give this video a like if you enjoyed it. Leave me a comment, ask me a question. And if you're interested in working with me, there's lots of options below, from private coaching to I have an online course as well if you're not ready for the big investment. But thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next week.